Hey everyone, Tactics here with a new series where I'm going to be going over some higher key VODs here, discussing route variations and pulls that more coordinated groups are doing, while providing hopefully some details that may be easy to miss and will help you out if you're pushing for the 0.1% Mythic Plus title or just looking to improve in general. In this video, we've got a plus 26 Waycrest Manor on Fortified, Afflicting, and Raging week, and we actually end up two-chesting this plus 26 using this route, so it's quite quick. One big thing to note about Waycrest in particular is the witch rotation, so that's what we're going to dive into here first before actually getting into the walkthrough itself, because it does actually change weekly and it has a decent impact on your routing. So it is something that you usually would want to maybe check before you run a key. I usually just pull up a VOD of someone like on the Radio.io leaderboard, just look who ran a Waycrest that week, try and find a VOD or anything of it just to see where the witches have actually spawned, because there are some important decisions to make. And I'm actually going to pull up MDT here to kind of show you guys what that's like. This is the kind of route that we're going to use in this specific video, and I'll link the Wago link down in the description if you want to import it for yourself. But the main random witch spawns are one here, one there, one in this room with the worms up here, and one down here in the bottom right, which you're not really going to ever interact with. And basically, you can have some of these spawn, and when they do spawn, they aren't necessarily what's in MDT here. They can be a Soul Charmer, or they could be a Rune Weaver as well. So there's a bit of RNG here in terms of what you're going to be getting. The big thing is pulling two of these witches at a time is a no-go. And so, for example, if you have both this witch and this witch spawning on a certain week, you're going to have to break up this pull in particular, just so that you don't actually have two witches at one time. We're going to go in and do this pull with a Bloodlust, but if you have this witch, some common things are pulling this witch alone into the Sisters bosses with Bloodlust. That's a common thing for Tyrannical week. But again, you need to be careful. If this is the Etch witch, that player is going to be in extreme danger. If it's the Kick witch, you need to make sure that you have kicks assigned for volley. So again, just kind of need to be aware of where these are. And specifically, it's if you have both of these where it's a problem. If you only have one of these, not a problem at all. If you have this one here, not a problem at all. But for count wise, you do want to make sure that you are killing two of these witches. And if you don't get two of these witches in your spawn, which I'm pretty sure you should, like literally every time, but if you don't get two witches on your way down to the basement, you need to pull something extra. So something to keep in mind there before we actually get into the walkthrough itself. Now, as you saw in the MDT route here, we are going to Shroud to get through because that's in our comp. We have a Rogue. Pre-invis before the key goes in does actually work. So you can pre-invis and still keep your potion. You can see there 5 seconds and we're through. And then this is where we're starting with the group up here. In terms of how we are grouping this pack, note, of course, it's a big pull. It's a fort week, so we are going to commit lust to this. We are going to stop before the Disciple in the corner because we know, one, there's going to be 3 captains in this pull. And for that, we have each our DPS assigned to Solo Kick, one of the captains. And then we have, of course, Mass Spell and Spell Steals and stuff like that, purges, for if a kick does go off. So we have that, and I believe a kick does go off here early on. And on top of that, we need to see what the witch is, and I believe the witch this week is the Soul Charmer, so that's the Kick witch. And so me as a prop paladin, I'm going to be focused solely on kicking that witch, and we're going to put all of our priority target damage from the Fire Mage and the Outlaw Rogue into that witch and kill it first here. So we're going to group up, we make sure someone taps the man on the stairs, and I am not pulling into that Runic Disciple. So there's the Kick witch. I am not pulling into this pack because we just strictly do not have the kicks for it, right? We have 3 kicks in the captains, and the prop paladin is tied up kicking the Soul Charmer itself. So as soon as the Soul Charmer dies, because again it's the prio target, it's actually going to die, I believe, first probably with a Fire Mage and a Outlaw Rogue and Bloodlust hitting into it. As soon as it dies, then we'll chain pull. And you see here the movement has to be a little bit different than normal because we are dropping candles. So you see I'm doing my best to point these cleaves towards the outside edge so no one is in danger. And then when these candles go out, you see me take a couple steps away from those candles so no mobs are in the DR. There is the Soul Charmer dying. And now as soon as I get my bearings, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to interrupt the Disciple. And now basically everyone else is still on their same captain kicks. And now me as a prop paladin, I'm now solo kicking the Disciple now that my witch is dead. And of course, we've popped all CDs. It's a fortified week. That's why we do that here. Potential Tyrannical week is you'd pull, a witch or something if you had an early witch spawn into the boss and Bloodlust that. But it just kind of depends on your witch. rotation, and if it's tyrannical or fortified. This was really nice for a fortified. We only had one witch on the side, so you get to do a nice massive pull with Bloodlust here. And basically, as soon as the disciple is dead and the captains start getting low, we can kind of chain into the boss. I think it's going to die pretty even here, so we're not going to get much value chaining into the boss. Just fast forwarding here. Yeah, we actually kill all the captains and only have a couple guards left, and they're going to even die before we actually get into the sisters. So let's talk sisters here. I mentioned this briefly in my boss guide video, which you haven't seen. Check that out. But basically, the main issue I see here is people not kicking the off witches. The off witches are the ones doing random damage. The main witch is only hitting your tank. It's not a lot of damage. You never really need to kick it. So you see here, we basically have all of our kicks, and I will occasionally throw a shield out as well on these witches here. And notice, just for some specs, it's good to have these stacked up for cleave. So you see here, I'll bring Selena off the top, right on top of Briar. And then when Malady opens up, I'm going to taunt Malady and bring her over here on top of Briar as well. And then they're all just going to be stacked up in case that's valuable to your squad. The most dangerous phase, I believe, is this Runic Mark phase. If you have any curses spells, you can get rid of some of the dot damage here. Make sure you are moving or jumping or whatever. You don't want to be too high stacks here. So I jumped up to 3 for a second there. There it is. Not ideal. So, you know, as a tank, it's not a big deal, but everyone else, you want to make sure you're moving. Tip for the Jagged Nettles here. Evoker Bleed Cleanse does remove it. So that is a little tech that some people don't know about. So, excuse me, you can use that to remove it if you have an Evoker, or you just need to kind of heal through it, right? Good spot to defensive if you have a defensive and you are the target of that ability. Potentially, you're able to combat drop it too. I'm not actually 100% sure on that one, but something to keep in mind, maybe try. I don't think we've actually tried it, so could be. It's kind of a quick cast. But in general, this boss fight, once you've gotten a hold of kicking the off witches and not the main one, you can see the damage is not actually very scary at all outside of the Malady phase with the ticking damage. So it's not really a big deal. And once you actually get to killing Malady here, you're going to see we're actually going to add in one of the mobs at the side of the room here. I'm going to turn around, kick the Acolyte in, and we're actually going to swap to hitting the Acolyte on fortified weeks, because if you look at the health, 13 million, 8 million, we clearly want to hit the Acolyte because it has more health there than the boss. The only thing to keep in mind is the boss energy, which we are 42 seconds away from actually wiping, but that's so much time with a boss at this HP, so it's not a big deal. So we're just hitting the Acolyte. On a Tyrant week, you may need to continue hitting Sister Briar here, just so that you make sure you don't get murdered by this dire ritual. But on Fort week, we have so much time, right? And this Acolyte had more HP anyway, so we just kill that. Gives us a little bit of extra count. We're heading out into the Courtyard here. Pretty standard stuff to start. So the big thing is kicks. Again, Thorn Shapers, especially on a fortified week, are quite dangerous. I, as a prop paladin, am going to be solo kicking one of them, and then everyone else is going to be kicking the other one here. Keep in mind, on-death affixes do still currently trigger from these hounds. Maybe changed, hopefully changed in the future, but currently they do. This is not an on-death week though, so it's not a big deal, but bursting, sanguine, those kind of things, be aware. We're going to basically be focusing these Thorn Shapers. Fire does do some damage to some of the Wicker mobs, so keep that in mind. It can be a little quick. It can quicken up this area for you a little bit. Mini boss as well, I believe, can be hit by that if you stand the mini boss in the fire. It can be harder to move that, but you know, it is what it is. We actually do kind of a bad job here. We should have probably focused down a Thorn Shaper, and the reason for that is that would allow us to chain pull with the second Thorn Shaper and the Thorn Guard, which would be higher health. So that's maybe an area. I think what probably happened is our Fire Mage and our Outlaw Rogue were hitting different Thorn Shapers, and that means they died at a similar pace. If they were both hitting the same Thorn Shaper, we would have been able to chain pull a little quicker here, which you can see. Mind Soothe, so we don't chain this Thorn Shaper, we only get one, and that's kind of why it's good to kill one Thorn Shaper fast, so you can immediately do this chain pull. And then we also grab the mini boss here with this one Thorn Shaper. That's just to separate them, take some brain power out of it. I, as a prop paladin, can basically solo this guy on my own with some spare kicks from other people. And then we just are hard focusing here, Matron, getting her down. And you're going to see we're basically going to be chaining a bunch of mobs in this hallway onto the Matron. And we're essentially just going to be pulling until Bloodlust here, because even on a fortified week, the Goliath is just one of the harder choke points of this dungeon, so we want to make sure we have all stuff available for it. See, I grabbed some stuff here, and just I'm going to continue doing this until, the mini boss is dead and our Bloodlust is back here. You need to be careful. You see we are pre-spread a bit here for these Gorger jumps. You don't want those bleeds to stack up on multiple people at a time. We also have a bit of a stop rotation on the maggots, because spits, particularly if there's like a 5 or I don't know how many maggots were in this pool, maybe there's only 3, but there's a lot of maggots going out and they all spit on the same player. Super dangerous on higher fortified keys, so having a stop rotation for the spits is actually quite good, especially if you combine it with those Gorger jumps. So something to keep in mind there. And for tanks, one thing to note is it's actually quite dangerous to be grouping these mobs up in these hallways. Of course, usually you're alone. And the dangerous one is actually the third one I believe I do, where I run down the hallway a little bit. See if I can fast forward to that. The second one, I think we end up just waiting to kill Matron here because we get these maggots. So we'll kill the Matron, but still 3 minutes on Lust in the top right. So I'm going to do another pull. In terms of what you're trying to get in these pulls, the big thing is no more than 2 Gorgers. 2 Gorgers is kind of the limit here. So you saw when I walked in, the patrol of 2 Gorgers was right there. So I didn't add any more. This only has 1 Gorger. So basically, as long as you're not adding this with a 2-pack patrol Gorger, you're good. The other thing is watching your number of Banquet Stewards. It's fine to pull 2, right? It's just very scary. They have a no cast time tank buster and just auto in general quite hard. So it gets spooky with more than 1 Banquet Steward. It's doable, right? It's not at the end of the world, but it's something to keep in mind. It's also quite annoying for melee and stuff with the dinner bells. It's just constantly bouncing you back and forth with the pack, especially as a prop paladin, and trying to be in your consecrate, right? A little bit annoying there. So something to keep in mind. I try and limit it to 1 Banquet Steward at a time. Also, of course, gives our comp, which has a lot of priority target damage, a big mob to kind of hit and cleave off of, which is actually quite nice. So that's why we also stick to a single steward here. You can see here, right, the steward's dying a little bit later. It's at 20% now, which is like, that's a lot of prio damage to it. I probably could have pulled more after this, but it's a little dangerous, and we have a lot of time in a Waycrest Manor. The timer is very, very lenient, so we're done that. I think this is probably the one where I mess up. Yeah, so I think... Or no, is this the smaller one I do? Okay. Yeah, so I realized I missed this Gorger here on the side, and the patrolling Banquet Steward is here as well. So I'm going to grab this now, Banquet Steward, with this patrolling, or sorry, the Gorger in the corner here. And yeah, because this is the one where I cheat. You need to be very, very careful of how you pull this stuff. Basically, what I should have probably done is do this in the other order, because this is like a bunch of mobs, right? I think it's like 6, 7. There's a lot of spitting maggots here that I'm going to get hit with at the same time as the smack, right? There's 3 spits, 2 smacks. Actually, there's probably a 4 spit over here on top of the melees from these other mobs. While the casts are going off, and I end up cheating here. Not ideal. I had some things available that I could have used. I wonder if I throw out a judgment here. I needed to throw out a consecrate here and then judge something to refresh to 5 stacks, and also not greed this trinket. So that kind of mix of things here. Putting your consecrate down in these hallways is quite good, assuming you don't blow your 5 stack, right? So you want to make sure I should have dropped my consecrate beforehand and then stacked up my judgment to 5. That would have given me 2% more DR, a consecrate to stand in, and then I should have just used this absorb shield sooner than I did, right? I used it after my cheat proc, right after, almost saved it, but not quite. Something to keep in mind there. Definitely avoidable, and it's honestly some of the more dangerous parts of this dungeon as a tank are grouping these mobs in the hallway to pull outside. Some tips as well for when you're turning the corner. A lot of people will sometimes LOS to avoid those spit casts, and like I said, AoE CC rotations on those spits, very, very useful to prevent people from just getting instantly one-shot. You can see here, health is quite low just from the random jumps and a few occasional spits going out, so it's quite dangerous. We end up losing the mage there to a bleed into spits, right? So it's something to keep in mind, right? This is very, very dangerous, even though the mobs don't seem like they're that dangerous. So just be aware of that. I think we have one more pull here, which maybe goes a little bit weird. Let's see. Yeah, so this is going to be, I think, a bigger pull here. I think I'm going to grab all this and then run through the room. One thing to be careful of, and I grouped here much better, actually. This pack here. Do not use an AoE ability on this pack, and do not pull off the Banquet Steward, because you can aggro Rawl. So I'm going to pull off the Waycrest Reveler, and I'm going to throw a Judgment. Obviously, I'm not going to Avenger Shield. I'm not going to pull off the far left mob, and that means that I do not pull the boss, luckily, and I'm going to run straight back out here. This was a lot of spits. Look at this. This is what you're trying to avoid here, and this is what potentially LOSing initially would help you avoid. I think this initially it must have been only me and the healer in combat with these mobs, and so when we turn the corner, boom, 3 or 4 spits went right into the healer there, and we just can't quite recover from it. And then another 4 shoot into the mage, right? And so we didn't quite get our CC rotation off in time for that to happen. So I battle res the healer, and then I have the I think he dies again. Yeah, I think I end up just soloing this pull for a little bit while they run back, because I think now with only 1 DPS alive, he's going to get hit by a lot of things. But I'm going to be chaining CDs here. I'm going to chain Bubble Taunt, build up resources, and then chain other things. We're going to be able to actually get back here in time, I think. Because they get back, I get a pain suppression. They throw barrier down. We're able to use that to our advantage. We are using a lot of resources here before Heartsbane, or not Heartsbane, Soulbound Goliath, which is not super ideal, but you know, better than wiping on this and having to regroup it and all that stuff. So we get it down. Plus, it's a fortified week, so not a big deal. This is when I add that Thorn Shaper as well. Probably could have added it to one of the earlier packs. That wasn't too scary. Maybe with that one Dinner Bell mob that lived for a decent bit longer. I kind of just forgot about it, honestly. Sits over there. So you can also pull this into the boss. Some people do that as well, especially with the prop paladin who can just solo the kicks anyways. Whatever you want to do, but you can see here we have Lust available, and basically as long as you're pulling this boss before like 15 minutes with Bloodlust, you're perfectly fine, right? You're in a really, really good spot there, because you're basically gonna get kind of 4 Bloodlust in this dungeon, assuming you're going relatively close to timer. And so that gives you 7 minutes of breathing room to actually use a Bloodlust. You don't need to be ripping these on cooldown like in some other dungeons. Soulbound Goliath, okay. So, the thing with Soulbound Goliath, I've heard a lot of, differing things about, oh, when should we clear? How do you deal with Soul Thorns? Blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about it. So, clearing. Basically here, the goal is to clear 2 times throughout the entire fight. The stack count doesn't really matter. I've seen some people, oh, if you clear above 30, you're just going to kill people. That's not really true. You will kill people if you're not prepared. And what I mean by that is the damage from the fire from when you actually clear the boss ramps down. So it starts, the very first tick, when you first clear, that is the biggest tick of damage you're going to be taking, and it reduces over time with each tick because, of course, the boss's stacks are going down. And so how you want to make sure you're handling that is by making sure that you are popping your defensives, whatever defensives you're using for that clear, whether it be personals, whether it be like barrier on the ground, whatever it is, you need to pop it before the tank actually touches the fire puddle, and need to be prepared and in that barrier for whatever it is for it, because that's the hardest hit. If you miss that initial mitigation, that's the biggest part of damage that you missed mitigating. So you want to make sure your mitigations are out and running before the actual clear happens, not after it starts. That's one of the bigger things I've seen. A lot of people don't know that the damage ramps down over time and isn't just a constant thing. Now, in terms of the phase here, Soul Thorns, we have a very good comp for Soul Thorns, because we have our mage is never going to be Soul Thorns because of Ice Flows. There, if he gets picked, he can blink out of Soul Thorns. Really, really good, good tech for that. Outside of that, the rogue kind of just has to deal with it if he gets picked. The dragon, if they have breath lining up, he can try and pre-breathe, which I think he does at some time, but he doesn't quite get it. Yeah, so basically what happens is some abilities you can pre-immune, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, well, it didn't work, right? So some those abilities, I think the common ones are going to be the breath from the dragon and meta immune from demon hunters, if you have that. So if you have that cooldown coming available and a soul thorns is soon, just hold it a few seconds and use it on the soul thorns cast to try and immune one of them. It's RNG obviously if you get the immune, but it's better than nothing. Outside of that, because players can't really pre-defensive a lot of the time on these soul thorns, what you're going to see us doing is rotating externals on them. So we've got pain suppression and my 1-minute sack as well that we're going to throw it on players just to make sure that they are good. And actually that's something we did here. So we're talking about clearing here after the soul thorns. Around 60% is kind of where we tend to look for the first clear. Defensively, I'm not out of options, right? I'm in a Sentinel right now. I still have Bubble Taunt available. I have Tear coming up, and I have Ardent, but I don't want to use the entire bag right now. So we're prepped to actually go in after this. So we have, I believe, Mass Barrier is what we're using on this first one, and some personals. And so the Soul Thorns goes out, and basically I've said, okay, if this is on not the mage, I'm going to bop them. Or so basically it's on Sim, because you can see here the dragon did pre-breath this one. This is the one he pre-breathed but he didn't get picked here. So basically, I'm saying if this is on the rogue, I'm going to bop him. Boom, bop him. That frees him from the roots, and I'm going to instantly clear now. You never want to be clearing when the roots are out. If there's a root on a player and you burning brush and clear, that player is like guaranteed dead unless they have like immunity or something. So something to keep in mind. We always wait for that to be cleared, and because I had a bop available, I just used that and we cleared with the brush. And we're using we use Zephyr as well. I'm not actually sure if Zephyr will work on that damage. Maybe it does. It seemed pretty comfy there, so it probably does. But, you know, Mass Barrier was definitely up as well to help with that, because that opens us up to actually use Disc Barrier on the second clear that we're going to do. And from there, we can just kind of repeat, right? We want to make sure that we're hard focusing the Thorns. I throw out Sack. I think we actually overlap Sack and Pains of Breast there. Not great. But in general, right, we have those available. And I think one of them, like the Evoker, actually does manage to pre-defensive with scales and have it off, so we don't actually commit anything there, which is nice. But we can see it's quite dangerous how much this ticks. Notably, too, the Soulthorn's damage is not tied to the damage buff on the boss. This will always deal flat damage. It's only the fire damage that is related to that, and again, it's the initial hit and it scales down over the duration of the tick. So that Soulthorn's damage is just full natty there. It's just dangerous, right? And at this point, I think we just make the call to do another clear here. I think I probably could have survived till the end of the fight just fine. I do have, you know, my trinket up. I just popped Sentinel. I have like a lot of stuff available, but I think for safety, we're just like, just clear. We have barrier available. It makes sense. So you're going to see I'm going to wait for the Soulthorns again. Same deals before. Soulthorns goes out. We're going to actually make sure the Soulthorns dies. Another thing for Soulthorns killing, like Baloralos, like the Nimue or whatever, the Dawn of the Infinite staff on use damage hits, save those for Thorns. That's what we did on this boss fight. So it can really help, particularly if like the rogue gets picked. That's like the big case where it's super helpful in our comp, because of course we have an AUG, and so the AUG saving his damage stuff for if the rogue gets picked is very nice. So something to keep in mind there. Otherwise, you have the fire ready to go. Boom, barriers down, and again, barriers down before I step into the fire and everyone's inside of it already. And then we just step a little bit away from these spirits and we're all good. Straight into Raw boss fight, I believe. Yeah, Raw. There's not too much to talk about here. As a tank, you never need to move out of the Tenderize, so you can stand on one side of the boss and bait them. And, you know, it can free up some movement if you get picked a lot for the Tenderize combo. Something to keep in mind there. You know, frontal's bigger. These swirlies are super annoying. You kind of need to stand in the area kind of like between where these spawn, because if you look, boom, it goes out. They spawn in somewhat similar lines to the previous ones. So it's tough. I wish they had a better indicator, but like this can, I think it does probably one-shot our priest. He gets hit by one of these swirlies, so be aware of it. Obviously, it's a little easier to dodge if you're further back, but it's not a great indicator, as you can see. So keep in mind to be aware of that. Bad camera angle because I'm turning around to dispel Afflicted, but that's really it. What pushed me there, I believe, is 3 swirlies from these ads hitting me, so these can still be a little scary as a tank. It's 2 actually, but for the most part, I mean, there's not a ton of tank damage on this fight, especially from Tenderize. So as long as you kill these that maybe a little bit further, take a step to the left here, kill these here, and then I could step to the right out of the swirlies, that would be fine. Or just only get really hit by one swirly at a time, not too close together. Or have a defensive running, like I'm in Sentinel here, that's why it's not scary. And you can use the CC strat on these servants. I think we do it later on towards the end, because we like knock a servant to one side just to make cleave a little bit easier, and then later on I think we CC probably at the end here. Yeah, I think I broke that CC. Yeah, we had a root go out, and then probably my hammer hit it, I think, and broke the CC. Yeah, there it is. Unfortunate, but we have other mobs CC'd here with roots and blinds and stuff like that, just because we're getting late in the fight, and you know, just no reason to waste some damage on that. Notably, we have the witch here, right? So we're going to pull this witch the other side, because we actually want to go downstairs the other way for our route, just for a nicer grouping. Etch is super scary on high fortified. You need to be very careful. As you see there, he vanished that Etch, so combat drops, melds do work on Etch. Super useful because it's a very, very dangerous ability. It absolutely chunks. Like, watch our priest health here. I'm spam healing him, he's spam healing himself. It's spooky, and you know, it's just something to be aware of. You want to make sure that you are, when it's only one, it's not a big deal, but in packs and stuff, big defense if you ever get targeted by an etch. Now, I'm going to go down here, and this is a pretty hectic pull on Afflicted week because there's a lot of dispels in this pull. There's a Curse dispel, there's a Magic dispel on the tank, and then of course there's Afflicteds going out, and so you can have up to 2. So that means ideally, 3 or 4 dispels are available, one of which is a curse. So what we do here is the healer is always dispelling me, the mage is always going to dispel who gets the random target curse, and then me and the dragon are going to be watching for afflicted mobs to actually dispel here in this pull. In terms of kicking, what's going to happen here is you need a melee kick on Matron Elma. So we have our rogue solo kicking Matron Elma. We have our mage solo kicking the captain. And then I'm going to be solo kicking the diviner. And the dragon is, again, just kind of floating on any spare kicks that may be needed here. We also need stops on the soul essence, but that's kind of usually just going to happen. That's kind of what the dragon is a little bit more focused on as well here. And basically, because there's 2 mobs here that have a decent amount of health, and then there's a lot of kicks required, we're basically going to cleave off of the mini boss here, killing this pack, and then once it's only the mini boss and the captain, I'm going to chain and grab another mob in the corner, the Thorn Shaper, kind of similar to the very first pull of the dungeon where we're kind of capped out on kicks here. We're going to kill until my kick is free, and then we're going to grab one more mob that I'm going to solo kick. That's exactly how this works. This would be a decent lust on a higher key. Potentially your lust would be back up, or if it's not back up, you could use it on the next pull. I think this key is a little low for us. Again, we 2-chested it, so we're going to scuff our 3rd lust. We're basically deleting it because we pull a little bit too fast, but potentially you would lust this or the pull in the basement. That's what you would be lusting on a fortified key week. Oh, it's the maiden. Actually, that's what the evoker is kicking. The evoker is making sure this maiden does not get their horrify off. That's what the evoker is doing. That's what they're doing. So yeah, all the kicks are actually used up here. Again, we killed this mob now, and I'm going to start looking over towards the Thorn Shaper after that decaying touch. Didn't want to move before that happened. You saw how much damage it did. We're going to get Soothe on that 2 in the corner. It's not necessary. It's just for comfort, make sure, guarantee we don't pull them. And I'm going to grab this Thorn Shaper here, add it into the pack. Again, I could have done this earlier, and I think that's the big thing. I should have done it a little earlier, but it's not the end of the world. Like I said, we have a lot of time here, and I'm solo kicking this Thorn Shaper. Bad frontal there, so need to be careful with that. And then we're just going to head downstairs into the basement after this. And for this pull, you can see our jump down. Very similar. Basically, I'm going to be kicking the 1 Soul Charmer. We do not pull the Soul Charmer in the corner, only 1 in this pull. And we're going to have a kick rotation on the diviner here to help out. I have a backup kick, I believe, on the actual volley, and I think that's where I mess up. I should have Avenger Shield that first cast, not kicked it, just to see, because I'm going to be in a bad place, I believe, for this volley. I call for the backup. It goes out to grab it. Super spooky there. I just misplayed my kicks a little bit as a paladin. I'm going to keep in mind. And in the meantime, we have our dragon, focusing on stops and stuff, and we call stops on the soul essences. Don't want too many of those random ones going out. Ideally, they're synced up. That really helps, but they're not always going to be, right? So sometimes they're not going to be synced up. Maybe you should let this one go off there. Yeah, not ideal, but it looks like a lot of those went into me, so it's not the end of the world. And the big thing here is making sure that Soul Volley cast does not go off. Soul Bolt on random targets is quite dangerous here. He's in Cloak, so we let that one go off on him, but it's quite dangerous if it does go off into someone not in defensives. And again, we're moving throughout this platform a little weirdly to avoid these candles, and you may need to sometimes get kicks as the candle is cast. It kind of depends when the last kick was. If you kick them and they immediately start to cast candles, they'll usually walk out of the candles. But if you kick them, there's a bit of a gap, and then they cast candles, then usually they'll start casting again in the candles, so you need to actually get a kick off. We're going to leave that Soul Charmer up for the rest of this boss fight. We're going to pull it in after. So just don't use that back area. And then we have Lord and Lady Waycrest. Pretty straightforward fight. There's some little things you can do here, which you can see me doing. So I have Avenger Shield kicks. Range kicks can also hit these, by the way. So that can help reduce the raid damage going out by kicking the random target damage there when you can. The other thing to keep in mind is this Discordant Cadenza only targets the closest 3 players to Lady Waycrest. This is important because what you can basically do is force these swirlies to target the same 3 players, whether you want to be, depending on your melee. For us, having it be on me, the melee DPS, and like the dragon is pretty ideal, right? So we can free up where our healer is and our range DPS is, and they can never actually be targeted by these swirlies. That's useful. 3 closest players, put your range like over in this area over here, put your whoever you want to be baiting it on this wall here, very, very easy. Other than that, you know, tank personally wasting strike, it's not nearly as scary as it was back in BFA, which is nice. And, you know, we have disease dispels, which it is nice to actually dispel this if you can, because the dot does tick quite hard, especially on higher tyrannical keys. Wasn't a big deal on fortified, but usually it is nice to dispel that early on in the ticking just to reduce the damage, because especially if it overlaps with one of the chord hits on that player as well, that's super, super dangerous. You can see I'm not going to get all the kicks here, but I'm getting as many as I can. It helps to reduce the overall damage output of this boss fight. Otherwise, not really a lot to look on here. Fast forwarding to the end, we're going to pull all these Gloom Horrors and the Heartsbane Soul Charmer up here. Potentially, you could probably pull this on the boss, maybe. It's just, there's no real need, right? Look at our timer. We have so much time here, especially on fortified weeks, so we're just doing it here. It gives you a prio target for, again, our comp to hit. It's very nice to have a prio target in these pulls for our comp. We have so much prio target damage, and again, just moving for candles, having one player out. These always target the furthest player, as you can see here. So we have our dragon kind of out, dealing with these baits right now, and you can rotate depending on your defensive capabilities or whatever it is. So he's doing that, and everyone else is just slamming this pack when you kill these Gloom Horrors and just go into the final boss Gorak tool. And there's not really a ton to talk about for this boss, right? Again, you could pull all this stuff onto the boss, not a big deal. It's just kind of excessively dangerous, right? This slaver will also jump to the furthest person. You need stops on them. I think notably they're like immune to blinds and maybe fears. Not 100% sure on fears, but they're immune to blinds, which is not good. So me as a paladin, I cannot use blinding light. We have to use stun, so it's, you know, I have Hodge CDR in this run, so between me and the rogue, usually we can get all of them. I think the Aug Evoker will occasionally help as well, but, you know, it's just very simple fight, especially if you're doing it on its own. Burn the ads with the fire when they die. We're never really hard focusing the ads. The DPS are basically always just hitting Gorak tool. The actual Dread Essence hit is pretty decent, right? Like, that's a decent hit in a barrier. Like, I can fast forward to the next one too. Like, Dread Essence hit. Boom. Like, that was with Zephyr as well, right? So these are pretty dangerous hits. On a higher Tyran week, you may need to actually make sure you are personaling every single Dread Essence. On a 26 fort, we didn't quite need to, but if you're doing like a 27 Tyran, 28 Tyran maybe, you probably will need to make sure you are personaling or have something running for every single Dread Essence. But there it is, guys. That is my 0.1% title route walkthrough for Waycrest Manor. Again, linked down in the description below if you want to use it for yourself, but keep in mind the witch rotation for that week. Hopefully this video helps you guys out. If it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it, including a video just like this one for every single dungeon in Season 3. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those down in the comments below, or come ask me over on my Twitch channel at Tactics, and I'll do my best to answer. As always, a big shout out to my Patreon supporters. It really means a lot to me, so thank you. And thank you to everyone so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.